Chapter 13, Planning Sales and Inventory, Part 1. This part of our course brings together many of the concepts we've already covered, skills that you've learned, and will cover the most important functions of merchandise management. After watching this video, reading Chapter 13, and filling out your visual organizer, you will be able to explain how a buying organization's plans interface with corporate plans, explain the purpose of accounting calendars, differentiate among various retail hierarchies, characterize the relationship between history and current trends in planning, and detail the various strategies for planning inventory. This is a great graphic that explains the interrelationship of the various types of planning that go on in a retail organization. Top executives set the strategies for the long term for financial performance, capital expenditures, brand considerations, and expansion. Long-range plans are top-down. Sales and inventory are dictated in the most general way. Senior VPs are given sales and inventory targets at the general merchandise manager level, and they divvy these up to the divisions which report up to them. Eventually, the buyers and planners are given their share of the plan to work with. Fiscal planning is usually done before the year is actually ended and adjusted as necessary to compensate for changes in projected sales and inventories. The merchants in the buying group, planners, buyers, and replenishers, and operation personnel merchants at store level have short-term plans which help them run the day-to-day and month-to-month business. They have a year's plan which was pushed down to them, but they are constantly tweaking their own detailed plans to adjust for current trends. These short-term plans are bottom-up and are rolled up to the top level to ensure corporate objectives are being met. Retail organizations must have the ability to compare months, weeks, and days easily and consistently. The common 4-5-4 calendar divides the familiar 52-week 12-month calendar into 4 equal quarters with months of 4 weeks, then 5 weeks, then 4 weeks. February through April are spring, May to June are summer, August to October are fall, and November through January are winter. Spring and summer are called spring season, and fall and winter are called fall season. Planning is normally done one season at a time. Notice the blank week in January. Every 6 years or so, an extra week is added to the calendar in order to true up the weeks, very much for the same reason we have leap year every 4 years in our normal calendar. These planning calendars allow merchants to look at last year or to a future year and plan sales and inventories. We'll talk about this, how they use these more in detail later in this video. Our textbook claims that the 4-5-4 calendar is universal, but that's not the case. There's also an alternative 13-period calendar which breaks the weeks up into 13 different 4-week periods instead of calendar months. Spring season in this calendar is periods 1 through 7, and fall is 8 through 13. Remember when we explored the hierarchies of retail organizations in the first 2 weeks of class? This slide shows how those hierarchies relate to planning a business. You can associate different DMM and buyer or planner personnel to this hierarchy, and this defines each person's area of responsibility. It will also relate to how merchandise is presented at store level, as we discussed in our last module on visual merchandising. In this example, the division is men's, and each of the nodes at the next level represent what needs to be planned: basics, furnishings, sportswear, which would be pants and shirts, collections, which would be designer, different brands and designer lines, and clothing, which is, shirts and ties and suits, are then planned in detail, even down to the SKU level for basics. Stop the video now and fill in the hierarchy you imagine exists for the merchandise category you are using for your merchandise presentation project. You can use this smart art graphic I've inserted here for your hierarchy, or you can create it in another way that works better for you. Just imagine what the organizational structure is of the store your category exists in. Merchants are always looking at the past. The accounting calendars we looked at allow them to compare sales for a day, a week, or a month exactly to that day, week, month last year or the upcoming year. But they must be careful that what they are looking at is truly comparable. They might ask, what day of the year was Halloween on last year? If it's a weekend day, sales are going to be better than if it had been on a Wednesday. Shifts like this for Christmas are even more impactful and will drive when and how you will schedule sales events. The accounting calendar really helps here. Almost all these sorts of holidays are comparable. Although we lost a week between Thanksgiving and Christmas in 2013 because Thanksgiving shifted from the 21st in 2012, which is the earliest the fourth week of November can ever be, to November 27th in 2013. This has an enormous effect on customers' buying patterns and can be a source of endless stress for retailers. Planning Easter is always very difficult for spring season. Holidays such as Easter, Passover, and Chinese New Year are all scheduled on a lunar calendar. Easter is held on the first Sunday after the first full moon, occurring on or after the vernal equinox, which is the point halfway between the winter and summer solstices. I've told you before that I'm a nerd. As a little girl, I remember entertaining myself in church by looking at the dates of Easter for the next 50 years that were listed in the hymnal. I think this sermon was over my head. In addition to holidays, we need to make sure we're thinking about aberrations in weather patterns or the performance of a sports team. We had really cold weather this year in February. It might be in December of 2014 this year, or maybe we won't get any cold weather at all this winter. Who knows? For this reason, many planners go back 2 or even 3 years to find more typical comparisons. And imagine trying to plan Seahawks merchandise this year. How many teams will win the Super Bowl twice in a row? The point is, if your business is affected by Easter in any way, you must plan the holiday based on the weeks around it last year rather than the dates they occurred last year. And you must look at a normal season for planning your local sports team. The Blazers will be complicating planning for 2015. Merchants are also thinking about what has been happening right now or very recent history to adjust current plans or create future plans. Are items trending up or down? Is there a hot trend you didn't anticipate? How's the economy? Are people feeling bullish or bearish? Is there new competition coming in? How will it affect us? Analyzing these factors help us adjust and plan for the short-term present or for the long-term future. We're going to review some different ways inventory might be planned. In this video, I'm going to review some of what the book explains in detail, and I'll be skipping other parts. You should be aware that no one uses just one of these methods for planning inventories. The plans evolve using a bit of all of them, along with a lot of experience and gut instincts. Remember, merchandise management is both art and science, and when it comes to planning, I think art is probably more important than science. The basic stock method uses the formula that the BOM of a sales period should be the planned monthly sales plus the difference between planned average inventory and planned average monthly sales. In this example, the yearly sales are $1,200,000. The average monthly sales is $100,000. The average inventory is $240,000, and when you take 1.2 million and divide it by 240,000, you get a turnover of 5.0. Using the basic method formula, the BOM for a month with 70,000 planned in sales is 210,000. So it's 240,000 minus 100,000, which is 140,000, plus 70,000, and that comes out to 210,000. We will be doing exercises in class that will help you learn the nuts and bolts of doing these plans. You will need to review the formulas for turnover, stock-to-sales ratios, average inventory, and weeks of supply in order to really understand how to use them to plan inventory. I'm going to skip this method that's in the book because it's unnecessarily complicated and I've never heard of it. The stock-to-sales method is the method I used over and over again to plan BOM stocks. It will be very helpful if you have the table I gave you in class that shows the mathematical relationships between the different measures of retail performance. I'm not using the book's example of how to use this method. Again, I think the author overcomplicates it. The spreadsheet on this slide is a plan that one of my students last year created for an assignment. You can see that all the variables we have been talking about come together on this spreadsheet. And in between BOM and sales, there are rows for stock to sales ratios. If you were planning this using this method, step one would be to plan the sales by month based on the targets you have been given. So if you've been given, in this case, I think it's a 5% increase, you would spread those out over the months. And then the second step would be to manipulate the inventory based on stock to sales ratios in relation to your planned turnover. You'd look at what happened last year. Maybe you got too much in one period, or maybe you had too little, and you'll want to plan your inventories up or down relating to that. Again, we will practice this in class. I'm skipping these parts of the chapter as well. As you know, there's a mathematical relationship between stock to sales and weeks of supply, and the same principles would be involved for that method as were discussed in the previous slide. And planning for replenishment is way too complicated for such a brief explanation. Suffice it to say, staple merchandise is planned at the SKU level. This concludes this video. We've covered the materials in pages 275 through 290, and we'll finish chapter 13 in the next installment, where we'll learn how to calculate open to buy, plan assortments based on diverse merchandise attributes, and connect how certain resources assist in planning future trends. Bring your visual organizer to class on Thursday, where we'll be working on how to apply what we've been exploring today in this video.